Today more than ever, Bible-believing Christians are seeking to understand how our lives as followers of Jesus overlap with the realm of the civil government. In an age of dramatic political polarity, Christian believers are seeking biblical answers to crucial questions like, how does the state impact our daily lives, our families, and our churches? Does the sphere of the kingdom of God overlap with the sphere of the civil magistrate? And what does the Bible say about the role of the church in the state? Well, in this conference, we'll attempt to provide some biblical clarity on these questions. We've gathered some of the most important thinkers and speakers on this topic available in Western Pennsylvania, such as Dr. T. David Gordon, who's a retired professor and noted New Testament scholar at Grove City, Dr. Barry York, who's the president of the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh, Dr. Johnathan Watt, who's a multifaceted thinker, writer, and professor at Geneva College, Dr. J. Nykirk, who's a college professor and the clerk of the Ascension Presbytery, and the Honorable Cheryl Allen, who is a well-loved and respected judge and legal scholar. With them is also Pastor Dr. Matthew Everhart, Reverend David O'Leary, and Reverend Jared Nelson. These three men are local PCA church pastors. Each speaker will attempt to bring clarity to these questions from the perspective of their own unique training and background. Our conference theme, Christianity and Civil Government, will provide a framework for exploring the purposes of government in Scripture, a Christian response to both godly and ungodly leaders, as well as some unique consideration of our own history as American Reformed believers. Our prayer is that this conference will be a time of spiritual renewal and a source of encouragement for your walk with Christ.
Now we're on. Does that sound better? Okay. Well, maybe you wanted it previously. You couldn't hear me that way. Who knows? I want to thank you very much for the invitation tonight. It partly answers, I think, someone said to me earlier today, how did you end up on the program? I said, I think it was a mistake somewhere, but there I am. And by the way, in what you said, I thoroughly enjoyed what you were saying a little while ago. You've empowered me actually to admit I actually start this evening with, this has been a disappointing week for me. The candidate that I really, really, really hoped would be elected president, first the bad news, was not. But the good news is Dr. J. Nykirk, who is the fellow, will still be speaking here tomorrow. So I think it's going to work out. I think it's going to work out okay. Anyway, the topic tonight is one that we came by with a little bit of a dialogue. It wasn't exactly an assigned topic, but it was one of a handful of options, and I think we went back and forth a few times on email, not in an angry way, just back and forth with ideas. And I'd like to do a couple things with you this evening that I hope you enjoy. I hope you find illuminating and reflective. And I'll explain sort of a little bit as we go along here how this works out. And I want to thank, he's not here tonight, but one of my students did a very nice PowerPoint presentation for me, for which I'm very grateful. And but I want to give credit where it's due, because I'm not this tech savvy. And actually, I don't know if I can show you this. He even, there we go. Look at the way it comes back here. Nope, no, wait a second. This is what I want to show you is, there we go. Oh, okay. It actually had moving curtains that came apart. It was really, no, it was nice. It was really dramatic. So I just want best I can do here. It's also going to be interesting. Not one of these good news, bad news things. I had eye surgery this summer, so I can see, which is nice. Had the cataracts out, the fake lenses in. You all are coming in at 20/20 for me. I've had this good eyesight since I was a little kid, right? The problem is I can't see my notes. So that's why I have these. And I can't see what's behind me, so if I keep on turning on, I apologize that it is a bit awkward. Anyway, Christianity under Constantine, there's some fascinating things that take place in the 4th century. And I want to just describe them tonight. I'm not here to paint everything, wonderfully positive or horribly negative, but just to get acquainted. And maybe some of you are already down the road acquainted with this stuff. If you are, I hope you can still gain something good from here. but a very key set of conceptions shifts profoundly in the 4th century. That is very welcome in some areas. It's probably not welcome in other areas. I simply want to survey the field a little bit and get a taste of that with you tonight. When I was a kid, I somehow got passed on to me a couple of things that were a little bit more peaceful than the sword that was also passed on to me from the 19th century. Nobody lost their lives, although I was told to put it away. These came more peacefully in the form of coins. And they were really old coins, and they came from my mother's side of the family in England, which is partly where I grew up as a little kid. And they were roughly 2,000-year-old Roman coins. And a number of them are actually 1,700 years old. They're actually Constantine coins. And so the name Constantine first got sort of burned into my memory as a little kid. I didn't know the significance of the fellow, but I had some, frankly, amazing images. Some of these coins are just in incredible shape. You can see in the image of Constantine on these Roman coins, even the hair, the lines of hair on his head, it's a remarkable detail still in place. So that's how he first sort of entered my awareness, and then it grew after that. I should probably ask, so I get a sense of the age group here, be honest with me, how many of you, when you hear the name Constantine, the first image that comes to your mind is a dark-suited Keanu Reeves? A few of you. That's what I thought. I suspected. This is not the same guy. This is the other guy. And I don't have any images on here, but just go to your phones. I give you permission, so long as the ringer's up. Look up a nice picture. There's some really neat stone busts of Constantine from the 4th century. You get a bit of an idea of what he looks like, and then you can use your imagination from there. Let's pray, and then let's talk about him together. Father, thank you for a chance to, frankly, have the breathing room to reflect and to learn. The freedom to be able to talk about these things without fear of encroachment and difficulty. The opportunity to sometimes reflect, maybe end up at some different places that may well come about as a result of tonight. But nevertheless, we're talking about someone who, in many ways, set a legacy forward that in a variety of ways have affected us today, albeit very indirectly, and we'd like to simply revisit and get acquainted with the past. And we thank you for that opportunity and the people tonight to do it, and a setting in which to do it freely. In Jesus' name, we thank you for all of that. Amen. So when people talk about Constantine, they often have some pretty extreme views, by the way. I've read historians. I am not a professional historian, but you know, like a lot of us, I can read this stuff and get acquainted. And I've read a number of either very, very positive views, a number of very, very negative reviews. And I don't come here to either praise Caesar nor to bury him, okay? None of that Shakespearean stuff. I'm just going to talk about him and hopefully get a bit better acquainted. I'm not going to give you, we call hagiography, the overly glowing, idealized picture of someone. I'm not going to do that. I am going to speak with some appreciation for some pretty interesting, positive things that occurred in the 4th century, but I'm also going to sew into them some of the real liabilities that opened up as well. I was thinking about these, actually. It was just in what was Constantinople, Istanbul, with a group of people back in May, and had a lovely time touring around there. Again, it's a neat place to go to. I was reminded there, as well as I am tonight here, there's a historian named Barbara Tuchman who writes a number of histories, including a book of what she calls the calamitous 14th century. It's called A Distant Mirror. And she says we can use history to sort of reflect on our own times. And I like that idea. History is not the same as us. We're in a different world. But there's ways to use it in a way that can give us perhaps some insight. That's what I'm hoping to get tonight with you. So let's see if I can get this going here and get the right, perfect. That's where we want to be. So just to get our bearings, Constantine is born in what is today Serbia. Okay, and he's born to a high-ranking military officer who is, at least as far as we know, is not a believer, at least not at that time. But his mother, Helena, is. And that surely leaves a significant stamp on the future. He is not, even though the dad is a high-ranking officer, Constantine is not from royalty, and that's actually also going to play out, positive and negative, in some of the things that are going to happen later on. What is significant, and where we're going to focus so we're not doing a whole lot of background stuff on this guy, is under the emperors Diocletian and Galerius. We're now, just to help you get situated here, we're into the sort of late 3rd century, okay, early 4th century. Constantine is born in 272, so he's actually fairly young when some pretty significant things are happening, and they are not good. And though Christianity is sometimes imagined to have been persecuted mercilessly under the Romans all the time, that's actually not true. There were some absolutely merciless persecutions. Some of them that were merciless were not system-wide, but were regional, spatial. And then some, and Diocletian's is one of those, is noted for its brutality and the widespread nature of the brutality. And then what happens is, under Diocletian Galerius, there is after this bloodshed some real regret on the part of Diocletian late in his life, when I think the guy's starting to think to himself, I've just shed the blood of a lot of innocent people and allowed it. What will the gods do to me when I die? And that seems to be weighing on him significantly. Anyway, it's under them that Constantine is in some significant places, fighting in Persia in the east, in the west up in Britannia. Yeah, you know where that is, right? And then what's interesting is he will be proclaimed one of the terms for Caesar, because the guy is clearly a very effective leader. And this is one of these things that plays out throughout history, right? People who establish a record of leadership are often looked at for other potential positions of leadership, including, for example, from military to government. And this is going to happen as well with Constantine, and those kinds of things he's going to make his way and eventually be proclaimed notice what I'm saying here, one of the leaders of the Roman Empire, at a time where, though the Roman Empire has not fractured, it is giving hints that it's getting big enough, bulky enough, diverse enough, messy enough, that there's a lot of push and pull between it and within it. And at this point, there will come about 4 different people, all with sort of the right claim to be the head of Rome, albeit they are regional people, military leaders. And that's kind of unnerving when you think about it. Rome we often think about as the symbol of stability, power, iron fist, hold it all together. And in many ways they do. But if you picture it in your mind, I don't have a map up here, but if you picture at this point, Rome is all around the Mediterranean. Right? So they're across North Africa, they're north of the Mediterranean, they're east of the Mediterranean, they're up into the Isles, the British Isles. I mean, they're just everywhere at a time when there's no fast transportation, no fast communication, even with the advances that they've made. So it's almost inevitable these kinds of things happen. Well, anyway, what happens is this. I think I'm going to be on the next slide here. Isn't that beautiful the way he set that up? Yeah, I want to tell him. No, it is. I don't have that kind of creativity. Andrew did a beautiful job here. So what happens is this. After he is made emperor, well, one of the emperors, something bad is going to be starting to end, and something good is at least starting to bud. And there's a crucial couple of years, 311, 312, 313. Okay, and Diocletian has had his worries. By the way, it's funny. Did Roman emperors really believe they were God? Okay, probably some yes, and probably some no. Okay, so Vespasian, who is famous for setting up the Colosseum in Rome. Okay, you all know about the Colosseum, right? Most of the work is done under his life, though the end is dedicated by Titus. Vespasian, when he's on his deathbed, he says sarcastically, "I think I'm about to become a god." Okay, there's some wisdom in there, right? On the other hand, Diocletian, who has acted as if he was God, leading into his last years and months, is having big doubts. And then Galerius, who sort of covers for him, he then is in ill health and he's having doubts. 311 is a sort of a conciliatory step towards allowing non-approved religions, particularly Christianity, to exist in the Roman Empire. Remember, this is coming from, this, if you will, the central office. So whatever's coming from the central office, at least in theory, will hold across the empire. And the empire is broad enough. Sometimes things get done in places that maybe weren't allowed or should have been but weren't. But at least in theory, this is empire-wide. And this is, I'm going to give you a term here, and I can't remember if we put the term up. Yeah, we did. So you have what is, up until this point, Christianity is what's known as religio illicita. We still use the word illicit today, meaning illegal, not approved. And it's a religio illicita, okay? And it's going to be given the status of religio licita, okay? It's going to be lawful if you're a Christian. People may not like it, but the point is you can't get persecuted for it, okay? So 311, there's a couple steps, 311, 312, 313. These things are going to take place, and this is a good thing, okay? And then what still remains is going to be, well, who has control at least of the part of the empire where Constantine is going to end up, namely Rome and around Rome. And in 312, there is going to be a key battle, a crucial battle at the place called the Milvian Bridge over the Tiber. And he's going to fight against his primary opposite, a guy named Maxentius, okay? Who has a good bit of claim on also being, whether they call it Augustus or Caesar. These two terms are being in use, and the battle goes to Constantine. He wins. Now, many of you have heard. I'm going to say essentially rightly about what's so interesting is that according to reports, I need to say this, there's a variety of reports. Okay, so Constantine himself will later report this to the church leader Eusebius of Caesarea, who writes at least in existence today, the oldest sort of more or less, it's not really comprehensive, but broad church history that we have. There were other histories, but most of them are lost or only referred to. It's one we have intact today. He's the one who gets information from Constantine, in which something like this, you'll hear a couple of different things. One is that Constantine, sees the words in the sky, in hoc signo vinces, in this sign, conquer. Okay, and the sign of the cross is there, and they put the mark of the cross, or depending on who's reporting this, the famous Chi-Rho signature. Chi-Rho are the two letters of the Greek alphabet that start the name Christ. Okay, one looks like an X, and one looks like a P, okay? But the X is a sound, like you're spitting, okay? And then the P is an sound. It's an R sound, okay? And you've probably seen this. It's a very, very traditional Christian symbol and has been for a long time. So whether they're seeing words, whether they're seeing symbol, whether they're seeing a cross, it all depends, who you're listening to. And I'm sure if you go to the internet today, you can hear more stories about it. But that's at least for the ones that were circulating with the internet in Constantine's day. So anyway, he becomes ruler. By the way, in subsequent warfare, which doesn't really concern us, we're just going to reference it, there's more civil warfare. And the other general who at least is the biggest threat to him, a guy named Licinius, a couple of years later, is going to be knocked out of the picture. And Constantine will have the central position as basically sole emperor of Rome. It doesn't happen overnight; it happens by a handful of years, but becomes into this role at from my point of view anyway, a relatively young age. So that's kind of there's lots more we could say about the history of him, but at least you get a little bit of a sense of the background and how it flows and so forth. And so what I'd like to look at in the next few minutes are two things, basically. That's the background, okay? By the way, just so you know, just to make it nice and easy on you, this is, if you were on campus at Geneva, this is the point I'd give you the midterm exam, okay? But you get past that. He said I was not allowed to do that, so tyrant that he is. And then the final would cover the next 2 points, okay? But you get off easy tonight, so brutal beast, yeah, okay. Anyway. So I'd like to think for a few minutes about how Constantine helped Oops, there we go. No, sorry, I'm just getting too energetic here. Go back one more, hang on. No, I think I'm missing something here. There we go. And some of it we've already gotten down to, so we at least have a start here. So what are some of the ways in which we can legitimately say Constantine helps the situations of Christians? Here's an interest, before I go directly, let me just make an observation, which I find interesting. If you read defenses of Christianity, particularly from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, I'm not saying they didn't exist in the first, but particularly in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, one of the things you see in the defense, the apology just means, or apologia just means defense, not apology as we mean today, but a defense of the faith. The people who are writing these things tend to direct their comments outwardly. They're directing them to, if you will say broadly, the pagan criticisms of Christianity. They're answering, they're defending, they're interacting with whatever. And there's something rather refreshing. It's something real base level, all right? But it's refreshing in this sense, is that they're aware, and you can see it in the way they write, of sort of the world out there with all of its stuff, okay? And it's stuff, whether it's stuff that's confusing or horrible or assaulting, whatever it is, they're addressing things out. So under what's going to happen under these years we're talking about, focusing on, the good news is Constantine is going to help Christianity in ways I'm going to describe. But one of the side effects is going to be, increasingly it's going to be easier to turn your eyes inward. Now that's not always bad, okay? But one of the things that does is it allows leaders of the church and whoever else is participating to start to say, here's what our faith is about. How do we understand, for example, the mystery of the incarnation, which is a very, very, very complicated thing, right? Simple in one sense, and incredibly complex. God and human, how do you put those two together? They start to work on those things. That's the good news. But then also a whole bunch of other stuff bubbles up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the Edict of Toleration and Allowance in 311 will give way in the year 313 to the Edict of Milan. Okay, the Edict of Milan, which is almost like a circular letter that goes out, if you will, to everyone. Okay. You know, this is the kind of thing where if they had email that day, you'd be getting it 53 times from 27 sources. Oh, the Edict of Milan again, you know. And you know, send to the job. But of course, it's a very, very significant kind of thing. And what it does, it says officially and absolutely tolerance for Christianity. But this is just the first official step, okay, on a grand scale, all right? Here is the words of one writer. Constantine will do much to, quote, push Christianity toward the mainstream of Roman culture. Push Christianity towards the mainstream of Roman culture. Now, I hope at this point you're saying, I can imagine ways that's good, and I can imagine ways that's not good. And if you're feeling a little bit actually, seriously, I'm hoping you'll leave ambivalent tonight. I really do. I want to encourage that. I'm not here to praise or bury. I'm here to describe and get acquainted. And if you're saying, I can scratch my head in both directions, I think that's probably a good thing. Okay? So he does that. He calls and officiates at the Ecumenical Council of Nicaea, the first of these 7 great ecumenical councils that will take place over a handful of centuries in the greater Mediterranean world. Expenses paid for delegates, hundreds of delegates to come from different parts of the empire. Leaders in the church participate in this council. It's basically northwest Turkey today. And furthermore, will pay for the copy and distribution of Bibles to people. Now, this is in a day when Bibles are handwritten. This is very significant. This is really significant. He's going to pay for that. So he holds the council, presides over the council, okay? Can you imagine if you pause and say to yourself, boy, that's really cool. In some respect, I'm going to play both sides of the coin here, okay? Shall we make these people represent the good side or the bad side? What? Okay, well, one side of the coin, right? Yeah, they're thinking, no, don't talk to us like that. We'll make you the good guys. Good side of the coin, think about it. The big guy is making possible what even the church itself could not really pull off for the previous 300 years. Understandably, couldn't pull off. And it's being pulled off at the top level. Let's agree, that's good news. That's amazing. All right, now let's play the bad side, okay? Good cop, bad cop kind of thing. The emperor is presiding over the church. Need I say more? Well, it speaks for itself. You've got a pro and a con. Okay, here's some interesting other things that follow out of this. These come in various years. I don't want to bury you in those kind of details, but I just mentioned them. Realizing that in previous years, Christians have paid for their suffering has paid not only sometimes in personal attacks, beatings, death, imprisonment, whatever, but the seizure of property. One of the best ways to leave a long-standing punishment of someone, because we take away your house, we take away your meeting place, we take away your livelihood, we leave you alone. We're not going to hurt you physically, but we've hurt you for a long time to come. Right? And that's gone one way. So what does he do? He takes pagan temples, okay, and properties and gives them back to churches. Interesting. Yeah, I wish I could just take that face and just put it out there. No, but that's exactly the face to have, like good, bad, right? There's some sense of justice. That's good. But I think the risks are self-evident. There's paying of indemnities to people in churches, that kind of thing. Recognizing that there's a justice issue. One of the interesting ones to me, again with a pro and con, he authorizes his mother in the later 320s, his mother is Helena, the Christian mother, to travel to the Middle East. Okay. By the way, in my book, someone paying for your travel to the Middle East, that's great. That's almost as good as ice cream. Okay? And that's great. And what she does is she travels around the Middle East and identifies Christian so-called holy sites, okay, which is very interesting. Pro and con. Places like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that's actually inside the wall of Jerusalem today. When I first went to it 35 years ago or something, I thought, well, this clearly wasn't the place where Jesus was buried. And then I realized, no, I won't go into a more complicated picture of actually why it actually might have been, okay? And it's actually one of the places Helena identifies 1,700 years ago as, rightly or wrongly, I don't know if she was right, but she said this is where Jesus was executed. Was buried, excuse me. So she identifies places like that and so forth. So she's marking holy sites and so forth. These are things which, again, get Christianity on the map. Now, if you've ever done a trip to the Middle East, you'll find that this is pro-con. The delight of, as we say, walking where Jesus walked. It really is neat. Although with Galilee, with all the discos around Lake Galilee these days, you can boogie where Jesus once walked. But that's the mixed feeling I had here. And some of the places that are identified are you just scratch your head thinking, I don't think so. Somebody's making money somewhere, and I'm sure that's the problem. That's the downside of she wasn't intending it would be that way, but that's the outcome. Now, one more thing that happens is this, and I hinted at it earlier, is Constantine is not part of the patrician class of Rome. And the nice thing about aristocracy is there's a stability and a regularity and a tradition and a cultural tradition that can go with those, but there's a downside to aristocracy as well, which, assuming none of us are aristocratic here, we just won't talk about in the words we might use, but he definitely is not one of those. And so what does he do? He'll never be fully accepted in Rome, no matter how much power he has. Why not take the old city, an old Roman city, and Byzantium, and sort of Christianize it. And in 330, Constantinople, conveniently named after the guy himself, gets labeled now the eastern flank of the empire, the eastern flank of the empire. So you've got now both a stability piece, but unfortunately, the seeds of what will eventually, over the next 1 to 2 centuries, also, 3 to 5 centuries, feed what will eventually be a rift in the empire, and then also a rift in the church eventually. That's another story for another time. So these are the kinds of things that I want to encourage you to think positively about in many cases, but also have that sense of ambivalence where you can see great promise and great difficulty starting to sow themselves in. Again, in the words of, and this is I'm going to go back to Eusebius of Caesarea. By the way, really a phenomenal guy in many, many ways. And in his ecclesiastical history, kind of a summary, Eusebius is saying things basically, Constantine was a God-sent emperor, chosen by God to end the persecutions. You can buy that. And to ensure the correct worship. Okay? Flanking there. Okay? Eusebius praises Constantine as a model Christian. I'll buy that in some areas, but in a minute I'm going to show you some further difficulties. Okay? And so I'm going to take a step back from that. It's interesting, he also compares Eusebius to Moses, who delivered, which in one loose sense is okay. Right? Moses delivers the Israelites from the tyrants. In that sense, we're okay. He does do that. But you could see how you could take a metaphor and push it too far, right? So metaphors are very helpful for conceptualizing something. If the metaphor becomes the thing that rules its own interpretation, that's problematic. Anyway, that's for another time too. Okay, he depicts Constantine and his successors as like sort of rays of light emanating from eternity to shine beautifully and piously on the empire. And I'm going to say in some ways he did, in some ways he didn't, and I'll talk about that in just one second. And I already said this, Eusebius is the one who reports Constantine's conversion. And by the way, people talk about was he really a believer or not. God only knows. I don't know that. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. I wasn't around to interview him, so don't ask me. I'm wide open to the idea, by the way. I'm not being subtly against. I'm just saying consider both sides. So let me just get to the next slide here. There we go. No, I got this heavy thumb. There we go. Okay, so that's good. So a couple reasonable questions to ask, okay? His understanding of the faith and his commitment to it. Let me play both sides of this coin here. On the one hand, at a time when Christianity is religio illicita, and at the worst of times when people are being horrifically treated, you've heard the stories of and they're well-based, torture under people like Nero, for example, and there's more. For someone to say openly, I'm a Christian, that's risky business. And to allegedly stake a political career, if you will, on that wasn't the time to do it. Okay? So I'm simply saying it's good to be open to the idea that something truly significant is happening in this guy's heart, mind, and soul. Okay, it's worth being open to that. Eusebius, who interviews him, Eusebius is the Larry King of the day. Eusebius is absolutely convinced Constantine's a believer, and I don't want to just let that stand. Okay, because he was there, he could see these things. How much he really saw beyond that, we'll leave that open. It's strange. Constantine spends most of his life as what's called a catechumen. All right? Catechumen, very, very loosely speaking, would be someone who might come to the church here, and you have a new members class, I think, don't you? And spends the next 40 years in the new members class and draws the line at that. He'll be there for the potluck dinner, all right? And, and he'll want his kids to marry your kids too, but he's drawing the line there. And so he does that, and then in a belief that I just have to admit is widespread with many people. At that time, the documentation is easy to read. There's a lot of people who believed that the actual act of being physically baptized actually removed your sin. You need to be clear on this. Many people believe this today. We associate that, in fact, with Roman Catholicism, but it's not unique to Roman Catholicism either. I've seen it show up in broad evangelicalism as well. Not commonly, but it's out there. So he believes that. So he saves his baptism, the physical application of baptism, until basically he knows life's end is just around the corner. All right, with the belief, as many others had that day, that if you have that, you're at least forgiven all your sins up to that point, which, if you only have a little bit of life left, that goes a long way. I'm speaking humanly. You understand what I mean by that. And he does that. Furthermore, is baptized by an Arian bishop. I don't want to get into Arianism, although it's one of the significant struggles of the day. It includes, among other things, the idea that Jesus is not God eternally, not co-equal with God, but is sort of deified, if you will, in the course of his experience in life. So you've got that really questionable kind of stuff going on in Constantine's life. All right. Furthermore, Sunday, all right, gets dedicated for the sake, presumably, of the soldiers to the god Sol Invictus. Do I have the name up there? Yeah, we do. There we go. How can you not love Latin, right? It sounds so cool. Almost as cool as E pluribus unum. So Sunday gets dedicated to Sol, as in God, like the word solar, okay? The invincible sun, as in S-U-N. All right, so he dedicates Sunday to Sol Invictus, and you're thinking, wait a minute. The day of the resurrection of Jesus being labeled that is, again, it's leaving you with, you're scratching your head as you should. That's all. I'm not here to solve that, and just hope you don't have fleas. So he also, and this is one of the very, very sad things, he will execute some family members. All right, he will execute his oldest son, Crispus. He has a couple of sons, and one of his later sons is not a good situation on the throne. But right now, his oldest son, Crispus, and Crispus's wife, Fausta, are executed, not on the same day, but on a related hunt. And it seems to have been done very impulsively, in a fit of anger. What is he suspecting? We're not sure. The implication is he suspects that they're showing some kind of infidelity to his leadership in Rome. But today scholars are kind of, there's possibilities, we don't know for sure, but he's willing to do that, and then something just seems out of control. And by the way, if you're dealing with a properly, we would say today, a properly there's been a trial, there's a formal condemnation, then maybe that question comes up, but this is not the way it works. He does that, and that just seems very, very tragic. It speaks for itself. So I take the previous panel, and then you got this panel, put those two together. This is the guy, okay? This is the picture, and the ongoing questions are left as they are to some degree. The ongoing legacies, which I'm going to talk about just a minute, again with a pro-con, is just evidence that the 4th century is a very, very significant time. I want to briefly acknowledge something that I keep seeing coming up in evangelical historical literature sometimes, which again is an overreaction, I think. And it's to say, Constantine basically perverted Christianity. Christianity prior to Constantine, go back to the 1st century or two of the Christian church, you have a pure version of Christianity, and by the time you get to the movement now closer together of state and church, where state establishes church, defends church, promotes church, gives restitution to churches, etc., that just basically, ruins it for the rest of us to somehow go back to early Christianity. And I see this every couple of years. I'll come up with some evangelical book which has maybe some good information in it, but this idea keeps poking up. By the way, the reason I don't buy it is I've read the New Testament. okay? And all you got to do is read the book of Acts or any of Paul's letters, just about any part, and you realize it's not that simple a picture, right? It just is not. So there we are. Constantine, in some ways, set up for a real compromising where the very guy who is in many ways a hero, he is, at a risk of his own situation, leaves also some very ambiguous and if not outright awful kinds of things. All right, I did it, just one push. Okay, so here is what we can say, whatever your particular thinking right now on him is this. And that is that Constantine, whether he realizes it or not, and surely to some extent does, he will effect a paradigm shift, okay? And by the way, as far as I know, the term paradigm shift, which you probably heard, was I think it was coined by Thomas Kuhn in a 1962 book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Kuhn's contention is, and that book is what is now 60 years old, which is kind of interesting. His contention of his book is that sometimes major advances in science are not necessarily because of new discoveries or new data, but because someone looks at things in a fundamentally different way. And when you do that, you then can maybe make some progress. That's the idea. Now, whether he's right or wrong, I don't know. But the concept is an interesting one to work with. And Constantine will cause to come about a bending of the perception set. Because up until this point, the state, at best, is neutral to the church, and at worst, is horrifically hostile, and everything in between. All right? And that has been the experience of the church, whether you read the New Testament, when you go in the second, third centuries. That's the way it is. There's no question about it. And now you've got not only a very, very close relationship with state and church, but the state defending, upholding, and so forth the church. That whatever you think about that, where it's good, where that's bad, this is fundamental difference. And you might, again, pose this question, a reflective question to yourself. If you were to transport back into the early 4th century, the first 30 years of the 4th century, and you see what we've described tonight, and you might be tempted, I think I'd be tempted to say to myself, wow, I wonder if the kingdom of God is going to have a more overtly earthly shape than I was imagining. Because when the state and life each day was brutal and harsh, I could easily say earthly, heavenly, all right? But now, wait a minute, they're kind of coming together. Maybe the heavenly needs to be pulled down closer, and we actually have some real potentials right here that I didn't know were there. I think that'd be a very tempting thing to believe. And by the way, it's kind of interesting. This is post-Constantine, but if you go to the Hagia Sophia, by the way, Hagia is spelled Hagia. It looks like Hagia, because that's a spelling of the Greek word for holy, feminine singular for Holy Sophia, holy wisdom. In Istanbul, which has been converted to a mosque, and then to not back to a church, but eventually, it was a church originally, built in the 6th century, and then converted to a mosque, and then converted to a museum, and then a couple years ago converted back to a mosque. They're still trying to decide what to do with it. You walk into that place, it is an unbelievable experience. Okay, now again, it's post-Constantine by centuries, but you're getting a sense of the trajectory of the glory of Constantinople. It's the earthly glory. I'm talking humanly here. The marble alone, I'm thinking, man, I love this stuff in my house, right? It's phenomenal. By the way, I just learned this second last trip there. One of these columns, at least, came from the old temple, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, in Ephesus. Okay, well, at least one of the existing columns there comes from the temple that was dedicated to what's her face? Yeah, thank you, Diana, and has been basically rifled to then build up the glorious at that point Church of God. So you've got a sense of we have potential right here on earth that simply couldn't have been imagined before. It also brings us closer to, again, an ongoing kind of a and I want to leave you with the two sides of the tension here. Something that an old classic by a guy named Richard Niebuhr puts out around 1950, a book called Christ and Culture, in which he's sort of the first writer that I'm aware of. There's a number of ones that have gone beyond his work that have said, the way churches and states relate to each other, there's a diverse set of options. So sometimes you see church equals state, sometimes you see state over church, sometimes you see church over state. There's various other combinations in there. And though Constantine is a good 1,600 years before Niebuhr, he's starting to sort of say, we could reimagine the relationship. And this paradigm shift is definitely going on. And it's interesting because I think this is quite in line with the theme of this conference, is if you have a faith that is so separated from the public square, it's too personalized, too isolated, and risks being irrelevant, right, on the one side. And then it's pretty clear the problem's on the other side. If it's so integrated with the culture, then what's the difference in who's really influencing whom and who's calling the shots? So there's slippery slopes in both directions, is what I'm saying. And a lot of those potential possibilities are opened up because of what Constantine has done. So it is an ongoing kind of a thing to have to wrestle with this, and I definitely don't have all the answers. I don't know anybody else does either. But leaves us with, I think, a good opportunity to reflect on. Thank God, first off, for freedoms and the many, many opportunities that come with them. Pray to God for all the risks that come often tied up with those freedoms. And Constantine's one of the many places in which we can start to explore that. So.